I started working at the Cheesecake factory in Old Town Pasadena about a year ago. I was a line cook, mostly doing prep and cleaning the grill before closing. It wasn't bad. The pay sucked, but the staff was decent. The only thing that made the place weird was the tunnel under the building. Everyone called it the dungeon. It wasn't part of the restaurant that customers saw. You had to go through a metal door in the back hallway, then down a narrow staircase that smelled like bleach and mold. The managers said it was used for storage decades ago, before the restaurant took over the building, but no one really went down there. The first time I went, it was to grab an old crate of plates. The light flickered nonstop, and the walls were covered in what looked like old grease stains. I could hear something dripping somewhere. The air felt heavy, like the place hadn't been opened in years. I grabbed the crate and got out fast. When I came back up, my coworker Troy asked if I'd heard the kid. I told him no. He said everyone who stayed there late had heard a little girl laughing near the bottom of the stairs. At first, I thought it was bullshit. But after a few nights, I started hearing things too. A metal clang, a faint whisper. Once I swear I heard someone call my name. A few weeks later, after closing, I told my friends about it. We were drinking behind the building and I said there was a tunnel under the restaurant that everyone said was haunted. They laughed at first, but then Greg, who loved all that ghost hunting crap, said we should go down there. I told them it was locked most of the time, but I had a spare key for cleaning shifts. They got excited like idiots. Greg brought his phone to record everything, and his girlfriend, Dana, came too. She said it would make a perfect TikTok video. The last one to join was Luis, another guy from the kitchen. He wasn't into ghosts, but he didn't want to look scared. Before we went in, I hesitated. I remembered how the tunnel sounded at night, how it always felt like someone was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. But I didn't want to look paranoid, so I unlocked the door and turned on the flashlight of my phone. The smell hit us first. It was worse than I remembered, like wet cardboard mixed with rotten meat. Dana gagged. Greg laughed and told her to stop being dramatic. We started walking down. For a few seconds, everything was quiet except our footsteps. Then came the sound, something scraping on the floor somewhere ahead of us. We stopped halfway down the tunnel. The light from the stairway was barely visible behind us. The scraping stopped. Luis whispered that maybe it was a rat, but rats don't make footsteps. We stood still listening. Then, a low voice echoed from the end of the tunnel. Just a single word. Couldn't tell what it said. It sounded like it came from someone with a dry throat. Greg whispered that it must be some speaker system or maybe a homeless guy. Dana wanted to leave. Greg said no, this was the best part. He walked ahead holding his phone high like he was filming a movie. I followed him because the light from his phone was the only one that reached farther in. The deeper we went, the more trash there was. Empty cans, broken boxes, torn blankets. Someone had been living down there. We turned a corner and found a small room. There were 3 mattresses on the floor, all filthy. One of them had bloodstains. On the wall, someone had written with red paint or maybe blood, "No one comes back." Dana freaked out and ran toward the stairs. I yelled at her to wait. Then, something moved behind the mattress. For a moment, I thought it was just a pile of clothes. Then I saw a hand, thin, filthy, trembling. Greg stepped closer and pointed the flashlight at it. A man crawled out slowly. His skin looked gray, his eyes bloodshot. He was barefoot and wearing a torn jacket. He stared at us like an animal trying to decide if we were food. Greg told him we didn't mean any harm. The man tilted his head, then started mumbling something I couldn't understand. Before Greg could say another word, another figure jumped out from behind. This one grabbed Greg's arm and slammed him into the wall. The sound of his skull hitting concrete echoed down the tunnel. I froze. Luis tried to help him, but the second man turned on him and stabbed him with something sharp, maybe a broken piece of metal. I heard Dana screaming somewhere near the stairs. The flashlight rolled across the floor and stopped next to me. I could see Greg's face, his mouth open, eyes blank. I ran. I didn't think, just ran toward the exit. But before I could reach the stairs, a small voice came from behind me. The voice was quiet, but clear. A young girl saying, "Don't leave." I stopped for a second. There, standing near the corner, was a little girl, maybe 8 or 9. Her clothes were filthy, her hair tangled. She looked scared, but her eyes didn't look normal. She wasn't crying. She was staring at me like she knew exactly who I was. I wanted to tell her to come with me, but I couldn't move closer. My body just froze, not from fear, from confusion. Why was she down there? Then I saw someone behind her. The same man who had attacked Greg. He stepped into the light, holding a pipe. The girl didn't even turn around. She just kept staring at me. He said something to her, something about feeding and keeping the noise down. Then he looked at me and smiled. His teeth were cracked and black. I ran up the stairs as fast as I could. I didn't stop, even when I tripped. I didn't look back. When I reached the top, I slammed the door and locked it. I could hear footsteps running below, then a thud, then silence. The police came about 30 minutes later. I told them there were people living under the restaurant, that they had attacked my friends. They didn't believe me until they went down. They came back up, pale as ghosts. They found Greg's and Luis's bodies in that room, along with old cans of food and trash everywhere. But the man and the girl were gone. One officer said that they might have used the service tunnel that connects to another building nearby. They searched for 2 days and found nothing. The door to the tunnel was sealed after that. Management said it was a liability issue. No one mentioned the girl again. I tried to go back to work a week later, but every time I walked past that hallway, I thought I could hear something. Faint metal clanging, footsteps, a soft humming. The police never found the other brother. They said maybe he died down there too, hidden somewhere in the dark. But I knew what I saw. The girl wasn't a ghost. She was alive, and she wasn't trapped. She stayed there because that was her home. I quit a month later. Couldn't stand being in that building anymore. Every time someone mentioned the Cheesecake Factory, I thought of that tunnel, the smell, and the sound of Greg's skull hitting the wall. A few nights ago, I saw a TikTok about the place. Some guy said he worked there now, that he'd heard strange noises coming from under the floor after closing. He even filmed part of the hallway before management told him to stop. In the background, near the bottom of the frame, I could see something move. For a second, the camera caught a small figure standing at the end of the corridor. A little girl in dirty clothes.
I used to go to the shopping mall every Friday night. It wasn't about shopping, just routine. The air conditioning, the empty halls, the hum of closing stores. It was the only quiet place I could walk without thinking too much. That night was like every other night, until I saw something new near the food court. A booth I hadn't noticed before, right between a souvenir shop and a juice stand. The sign above it said, "The Cheesecake Factory," in shiny gold letters. No one else seemed to care. It hadn't been there yesterday. A woman stood behind the counter, old, neatly dressed, wearing a pink apron. Her hair was white and tied up in a bun. She smiled the moment I looked her way, too quickly, like she'd been waiting for someone to notice her.
"Last slice of the night, dear. You look like you could use something sweet."
Her voice was calm, warm even. I hesitated, but the smell coming from that display case was unreal, sweet, buttery, heavy. I walked closer. The booth was spotless. There were no price tags, no brand logos, nothing but a small fridge full of perfect slices. They didn't look real. Each one looked like it had been sculpted and painted instead of baked. The old woman tapped the glass.
"This one's special. You'll like it. Best ingredients in the city.
It was a raspberry cheesecake, or that's what it looked like. She carefully slid one slice onto a plate that didn't match the rest of the setup. Real porcelain, cracked at one corner, like it had been reused too many times. When I asked if it was new, she smiled again, a little wider.
We open whenever we're needed.
The card reader didn't work, so I paid in cash. She counted the bills slowly, not taking her eyes off me. The booth had no receipt printer, no cash register, no decoration. Just her, the fridge, and those cakes. She handed me the plate, her fingers brushing mine. They were cold. I sat down at one of the nearby tables. The mall was almost empty now. The janitor was sweeping in the distance, and a security guard was talking on his phone near the entrance. I could hear the refrigerator humming softly behind me. The first bite was thick, heavier than I expected. The sweetness was there, but it faded too quickly, replaced by something slimy. I thought maybe it was just a new recipe, something fancy like an imported ingredient I didn't know. It wasn't bad exactly, just strange. I told myself not to overthink it and took a second bite. I don't even know why. Maybe I wanted to understand what that weird taste was. Maybe I didn't want to look stupid in front of her. The second bite had something inside of it, rubbery, hard to chew. When I bit down, a metallic flavor spread across my tongue. I spat it onto a napkin. The color wasn't raspberry red. It was darker. The piece inside looked fibrous, like skin. My stomach clenched so hard it hurt. I dropped the fork, bent forward, and threw up all over the table. The old woman didn't move at first. She just watched me, still smiling. I wiped my mouth with my sleeve, shaking. My hands wouldn't stay still. What the hell was that? But I know what it was. That flavor was pretty distinctive. It tasted like blood. She didn't answer. She leaned on the counter, resting her chin on her hand like she was watching a child misbehave. Then she laughed. It wasn't loud, it was quiet, broken, the kind of laugh that sounds more like coughing.
Only natural ingredients. I think that was a kid. Or his parents. Impossible to know, to be honest.
I gagged again, just hearing her voice. I backed away, bumping into a chair. My stomach kept turning, my throat raw from vomiting. I couldn't look at the plate again. The slice was still there, a bite missing, a smear of red across the cream. She didn't wait for me to say anything else. She turned her back, pulled something from under the counter, a small bag, maybe her purse, and started walking away. I remember the sound of her shoes on the floor. Slow, calm, like she didn't care I was still there. By the time I looked up again, she was gone. The booth lights were dimming and the hum of the fridge was fading. I didn't chase her. I couldn't even stand properly. My legs felt like they weren't connected to me anymore. All I could think about was what had been inside my mouth. I kept spitting, dry heaving, trying to erase the taste, but it wouldn't go away. It stayed under my tongue, metallic and sweet at the same time. I grabbed a napkin and wiped my face. The piece I had spat out was still there. I forced myself to look closer. It wasn't fruit, and it wasn't dough. It looked like a small strip of tissue, like something cut from a person. I dropped it immediately, stepped back, and almost slipped on my own vomit. The lights above the booth flickered once. When I turned around, the display case was empty. Every slice was gone. The fridge door was slightly open, cold air spilling out. There was no sign of the woman, no sign of anything being cleaned or moved. I walked away slowly, breathing through my mouth to stop the nausea. My eyes kept watering from the smell. It was sweet again now, almost pleasant. but every breath made me gag harder. I didn't tell anyone that night. I just left. The guard was gone. The janitor, too. The mall doors were half closed. Outside, the street was quiet, empty. My mouth still burned from the bile, and my hands were shaking so much I could barely hold my phone. It's been months. I still can't eat anything sweet. Even the smell of vanilla makes me gag. Doctors say it's psychological. Trauma response, they call it. But I know it's not just that. The taste never left. It sits under my tongue, faint but constant, like it's part of me now. Sometimes when I sleep, I wake up thinking I bit into something again, something soft, something alive. Last week I woke up to a smell coming from the kitchen. I thought I was imagining it, but when I opened the fridge, there was a small slice of cheesecake sitting on a plate. It was a normal cheesecake, and the smell was clearly an act of my imagination. But something so normal, like watching a slice of cheesecake, ruined my whole month.
I started working at the Cheesecake Factory in Pasadena in late 2016. I wasn't supposed to stay long. It was just a job to cover rent and keep my head above water. The kitchen was loud, full of steam, oil spattering everywhere, and people yelling orders. It wasn't hell, but it was close. The smell of cheesecake stopped meaning anything after a week. I got used to seeing the same customers. There was this guy who came in every other day. Tall, skinny, always in the same green jacket, even in hot weather. He ordered the same thing. Chicken Madeira and 2 slices of white chocolate raspberry cheesecake to go. Never smiled, always paid in cash. I didn't know his name, but we called him Green Jacket Guy. The weird thing was how he'd just sit there after eating, sometimes for hours. Not looking at his phone, not talking to anyone, just staring at his glass of water. Once I tried to make small talk, asked if everything was okay with the food. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Said he liked it too much to leave. I laughed awkwardly and walked away. That was the last time I spoke to him for a while. At first, no one cared. He was just another lonely customer. We all have our habits. But after that night, I wish I'd taken him more seriously. It started one Thursday in February 2017. The place was packed, people waiting at the door, Valentine's week rush. Orders were piling up, tickets printing non-stop. I was behind the counter taking to-go orders when Green Jacket Guy showed up again. He looked agitated, kept checking his receipt. He said his order from the day before had been wrong. He claimed we gave him something else entirely. I told him we could fix it or refund him, but he got angrier. His voice rose shaking like he'd been rehearsing that complaint all night. The manager came out, tried to calm him down. The guy started cursing under his breath, accusing us of mocking him. When security approached, he shoved his food onto the floor and stormed out. His eyes locked on me before leaving, and there was something off in his stare. Like he was trying to remember my face. The next morning, he was standing outside the restaurant before we opened, just waiting. I saw him through the glass doors staring straight in. He didn't look angry this time. He just smiled wide, like he'd forgiven us. That afternoon, around 4, we were at half capacity. I was taking dishes back to the kitchen when I noticed someone in the corner booth. Someone I didn't recognize. A man, mid-30s, gray hoodie, baseball cap low over his face. He was alone, fiddling with a large paper bag on the floor beside him. For a few minutes, I didn't think much of it. People brought shopping bags all the time, but then he kept looking at the bag, whispering something to himself. He didn't eat, didn't drink, just stared at that thing like he was guarding it. Something about the way he breathed made me uneasy. Heavy, uneven breaths. His hands trembled slightly and he kept glancing at the exit. I wiped a nearby table, pretending not to look. Then he noticed me. He smiled. Small, controlled, almost polite. He gestured for me to come closer. I walked up, cautious. "Heard this place had good cheesecake. You work here long?" His tone was calm, but there was a strange rhythm in his voice, like he was trying to sound normal. "Yeah, a couple months. Everything okay with your order?" He chuckled softly. "Oh, I'm not ordering today. I'm waiting for someone." He nodded toward the bag. His fingers tapped it gently like it was alive. I froze. Something felt wrong, though I couldn't say what. The air wasn't thick or tense. It was the silence between his words that bothered me. "You should go back to work, but don't move too quickly. Sudden moves makes me nervous." My stomach tightened. I looked at his bag again, then at his hands. They were shaking worse now. "Listen, man, if you're not eating here, I might have to..." He cut me off. "Call security?" "Yeah, I figured you'd say that." He leaned closer. "If anyone tries to touch this bag, we'll all stop existing in the same second." I stared at him, trying to process what he said. My hands felt numb. "Is that a bomb?" He didn't answer, just smiled. His teeth were clenched. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. The restaurant noise faded behind me, people laughing, dishes clattering, but it all sounded distant. "Don't worry, it's not meant for you. I just need them to understand." I didn't ask who he meant. I was scared that if I did, he'd explode right there. He motioned toward the counter. "Go tell your manager not to call the police. If I see a single uniform outside, this place becomes dust." I moved slowly to the counter, trying not to draw attention. My coworkers were busy, unaware of what was happening. I whispered to the manager, but before he could react, the man stood up and raised his voice. "No one leaves!" Everyone stopped talking. Forks dropped. He was shaking, holding a small device in his hand, something with wires. "I don't want to hurt anyone. I just need to fix something that broke." The customers started screaming, running toward the back exit, but he yelled louder. "If you move, we all die!" He began crying, sudden, uncontrollable sobs. "I used to come here every day. I liked it here. You people were nice. You didn't even look at me like I was garbage. But then you kicked me out. Why'd you do that?" That's when I realized who he was. Green jacket guy, only now in a hoodie, thinner, paler, eyes red and wild. I tried talking to him, my voice shaking. "You don't have to do this, please." He laughed and wiped his face with his sleeve. "I already did it. The only thing keeping this place standing is my thumb." I took a step forward, slow, hoping he wouldn't notice. "Let me help you, man. You said you want to fix it, right? Let me call someone." He looked at me like a child lost in a mall. For a moment, I thought he'd let me. "Call security. Tell them to come here." He was trembling harder. Sweat dripped from his forehead. I nodded and ran toward the service door. My heart was hammering so hard I could barely hear anything. I told the security guard what was happening. He grabbed his radio, but before he could speak, we heard a sharp beep. A single, short, high-pitched tone coming from the dining area. Then silence. I sprinted back. The booth was empty. The bag was still there, blinking red. The man was gone. People were screaming, running, overturning chairs. My legs wouldn't stop shaking, but I forced myself to move closer, scanning the floor, trying to find him. Maybe he'd gone to the restroom, maybe... The beeping got faster. I yelled for everyone to get down. The next second, light swallowed everything. The sound hit me before the pain. My ears rang, my body hit the floor, and the world turned white and gray. I couldn't move. There was screaming, metal falling, sprinklers going off. The smell of burned plastic filled my nose. My right arm was numb, and I couldn't tell if I was bleeding. When I opened my eyes again, the walls were blackened, tables shattered. The booth where the bag had been was gone. Just gone. Paramedics came minutes later. They dragged me out through the side door. I remember seeing the front windows blown out, smoke rising into the street. 20 people hurt, no one dead, somehow. The man was never found. I was in the hospital for 2 weeks. Burns on my arm, hearing damage, mild concussion. Reporters came asking questions, but I didn't want to talk. Police said the bomb was a homemade device. Nails, wires, fertilizer. Crude but effective. They said the man probably ran before it detonated. Maybe he planned to die with it but changed his mind. Maybe he wanted to watch it from outside. Every night since, I dream of that booth. I see him sitting there smiling, tapping that bag. When I wake up, I hear a faint beep in my ear that never goes away. I went back once, months later. The place had been rebuilt. New tables, new lights, new walls. But when I stood near the corner booth, I could swear I smelled burnt plastic again. A manager asked if I was looking for a table. I told him no.